talk to you about this area of fashion technology and directly with my work as related to performance. But very quickly, just a little bit about me, because Doug said, hey, introduce yourself, you have a crazy background. Started as a mechanical engineer, product designer, moved into some web work, also did an art history degree. Then all these things combined, and I ended up sort of on cruising around Europe, working at different museums, science, art, et cetera. Ended up back at the Exploratorium for my dream job, which at the time had no title, but it was you have to weld, yeah, and you have to be able to program, and you need to be able to think about culture. Now this is called the tangible media developer. But from there, I was working on really what it was about was connecting the physical world and the digital world. And the reality of this was that it was a tough, it was sort of early 2000s, and there was not a lot of technologies out there. The Arduino wasn't there to kind of help us do this in a kind of seamless way, in the way that we're used to working with mechanical interactors at the Exploratorium as being a mechanical engineer. I'm very fluid with that world, but every time we got to a computer, it became about a screen, and that you would break down all of this, all the things that you'd get from the knowledge that your body has intuitively. So that led me to MIT, and to this amazing lab called the Tangible Media Group in the Media Lab. And I started working on all different kinds of mechanical prototyping tools. This is a kinetic interface. This is a programmable robot. You program it by moving it around. This took off, took it around the world, got it manufactured, et cetera, and now it's for sale as a toy. So that's one direction. At the same time, being at MIT, also continued this line of thought into fabric meshes, which is where this will lead into the fashion tech talk, working on how do you have a programmable soft surface using that same sort of body intuition and moving it into different new forms of materiality. My PhD emerged as a study in different kinds of materials. I fell in love with algae and all different kinds of biomaterials, which led me into running now a small startup called Bodega Algae out of an amazing citizen science biolab called GenSpace in Brooklyn. So coming soon to an airport near you, grow your own jet fuel. Also, working on this as an artistic medium, where I'm working on an algae pixel display, so how you can actually think through changing biological organisms with different kinds of sensor input. But I'm here to talk about dance and wearables. So the whole idea of wearable technology has been emerging very recently in the press, like just literally within the last few months. You had the first episode of Project Runway that involved electronics, and the New York Times literally asking, which way to the ball? So I'll ask my gown. And you just saw this as perfect setup. The Google Glass is the first kind of like mainstream product to emerge as a wearable. And this new company, which just came out last week, just was announced last week, which is from one of the founders of Apple. So this is an area that's kind of emerging. So my phone is starting to ring a little bit more. I run the studio called Skin Interactive Studio in Brooklyn. And one of the main questions I've gotten asked about this area for the last 7, 8 years working in it is, oh, cool, you work with technology and fashion? How long until everything we wear lights up? And my answer is always, has always been and will always be, hopefully never. This is not a world that I want to live in. There's amazing, beautiful, expressive things that you can do with light, but this is not the be-all, end-all of this industry. And the main reason is that really kind of negates all the complexities of the body. And it's really reductionist to think, oh yeah, if we can put a light in it, that's the end of the thing. It's actually our bodies we're so intimately in tuned with what they're doing, and they're our most intimate pieces of technology, so we need to kind of capitalize on that with what we're wearing. So my story started at MIT, working on some artist pieces. A bunch of us got together, grassroots student show, 2004, basement of the Media Lab, $400 in arts funding, AstroTurf Runway, ended up packing out the place, ended up on the cover of ID magazine as Generation Wild. And that was like, we're onto something. It was collaboration between MIT, Parsons, Rizzo, get the designers together, get the technologists together, let's see what happens in this space about the body. So this led me to curate a whole series of shows for the next few years with artists all over the world. And I won't go into all these pieces, but I can talk to me after if you want to sort of know. But there's a couple of things that were emerging to me as sort of trends, and the reason that I was so interested in this area. First of all, generally in fashion, what we're wearing is really a big part of our identity. And people sometimes say, oh, I don't care what I'm wearing, but you're making a choice. Every time you put something on, even if you think it's neutral, there is a decision there, and it's how you're presenting yourself to the world. And there's a recent psychological study called clothed cognition, which is about saying they prove that if someone is wearing a medical lab coat, like a doctor's lab coat, they have more attention to detail. They're more attuned. They can do tasks better because of how it's affecting your own psychology of what you're wearing. Also, it spent the last year traveling certain places in the country with a friend of mine who's a stylist journalist for the New York Times, and she has a book called Fear and Clothing. And it's looking at how you can identify politics through fashion. It is beautiful and really, really funny. You know, we did things like Miami Beach, the Iowa State Fair, the Kentucky Derby, just as sort of points of reference. So that's sort of one area. I do find that what we're wearing is really important because it affects us so incredibly intimately and creates an identity. The second thing is about mobility. We are constantly living our lives on the go now. Most people don't have one office. There's not a lot of people that are doing things all the time in their home, and we're very much defined by what we can do while we're walking around the world. Everybody in this room has a mobile device on them. And probably that's like your closest kind of relationship with your body and technology. So that's kind of, it makes sense that we are studying all different kinds of ways in which we interact with our body. That's not just something that we hold in our hand. So those are some of the trends. The other thing is that Moron and other speakers have set up perfectly kind of these ideas of body augmentation. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about prosthetics, et cetera, but there are also other ways that wearable technologies allow us to experience the world in different ways. Thinking about animal powers. So on the top is ant vision sensing. This is, you know, if you want to see like an insect, or elephants hear through their feet, and this is an interface that allows you to do that. And also we can sort of think about how we can do sensory augmentation over environments. This is a helmet that you can use those different earpieces to cut out noise, so you can choose your own kind of urban pollution, your urban audio pollution. So just really some quick examples of what's going on in this area. None of these things light up. Just pointing that out. Also, the way that technology is actually changing the kind of fashion that we make. So it's not just about having the technology in the clothes, but it's about, first of all, things like, okay, everybody has a mobile device, so here's a scarf. I mean, I think everybody has that image in their head of being in a space and being on your device and being totally cut off from the world, but the rest of the world doesn't know that you're there. And there's this kind of back and forth of like where your attention is. And so Joe Malia made this thing that looks like a regular scarf. There's no technology, it's just a knit, but boom, you can tell somebody, don't talk to me, I'm on my phone. I'm using my phone. Here's another one for the computer. It's really funny. The other thing is about fabrication and how we can actually use technology to create all different kinds of patterns. This is just something called the News Knitter, which actually, at a certain snapshot in time, it'll print what's in the Google News feed. So it's literally like your garment is defined exactly by the time and place where it's made. So just interesting kind of conceptual ideas around that. The other thing is about activism and future scenarios. On the bottom left, there's a beautiful piece by Lucy Orta, which is basically, this is a sort of for a kind of protest, and it'll stop police from running in between the crowds. You can actually become, you know, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Another idea is around, okay, what if we I do these exercises with my students, take a perspective on the future of the world, whether it be utopic or dystopic, and figure out how your body's going to change or what kind of augmentation you're going to need. So on the top left is something called the micro-tourism interface, which is now, okay, you only have so many carbon credits. You want to go on vacation. So let's design an interface where you can change your whole scale. And you go around your backyard and you go on vacation in your backyard. This is a dress that actually is self-composting. So you wear it out in the world, you collect your banana peels, whatever, you go home and you take it and it becomes this beautiful table in your kitchen and it self-composts. So these are kind of concept pieces, but they're powerful because people can relate these back to themselves intimately into their bodies. But for my story, those are like work of my students and past artists in my shows. I've always been obsessed with this relationship of the body and mechanics, body and machines. This was like kind of the definition of my undergraduate art history thesis, of looking at this relationship of how we visualize motion. And when things are in motion, both bodies and machines, they actually have a similar aesthetic. And how does that come forward when we start to move into three-dimensional motion? And now it's become this relationship between robotics and people. And also, one of my design heroes, Oskar Schlemmer from the Bauhaus, defining the body as a mechanical organism has become sort of the theme of all of my work. So first piece, called Piezing, and maybe some of you recognize Heather Knight, past Mindshare presenter and a beautiful roboticist and model for me, for many pieces. So this is a garment that I made at MIT, and it's called Piezing because it involves piezoelectric fiber. And the idea is that it actually captures the energy of the body as you're walking. Like I mentioned mobility, we all have these devices on us, but we're only as powerful, those devices are only as powerful as long as they have power. And so you have to be able to hook it up to something, eventually. So this was ability to kind of free us from being connected to the outlet. And what the dress is made of is piezoelectric is a, I won't, if you want to know everything about the technology, I'll explain later. But basically, you can create vibration in it, and it creates an electrical charge, which you can store in a battery. And so I used this new kind of piezoelectric film along with these disks to create a charge that would then be collected into this central coin battery, and you could plug a device in. Now, in this prototype version, you have to walk about 5 miles to get about 2 volts. Not very practical. But the idea is that the system exists there, and there's new technologies that are coming on board about how to make this more, how can we incorporate this better. The first place that I looked, and I'm also working on a second generation of this, is into the biosuit. Professor Dava Newman, amazing, amazing piece of engineering. And the idea is that if you're using these rigid fibers around the body, you have to use rigid fibers because that's how piezoelectrics work, but you also want to have maximum mobility to get the most energy. You can't be constraining the body, so it's this kind of counterintuitive problem. The way that they've solved it for the spacesuit, because you have to have your body in tension, but you still have to be able to move, is through this concept. It's called the lines of non-extension by this researcher in the 70s, Iberall. So he's mapped this kind of weaving pattern of the body, this tracing on the body. This is the maximum sort of places, this is the optimal places where you can put rigid fibers and still allow for movement. So going off of that, there's also this new fibers coming out of Georgia Institute of Technology, which basically will allow this to potentially be weaved into these structures. So that was that. So that project led me to a recent collaboration in Paris with this avant-garde dance company. And the idea for this was to have a sustainable dance performance. It's called Rizzo Translucid. And there's a whole narrative around eating macaroons, and then, because it's Paris, and then the dancers would dance, and then I would collect the energy from their bodies and use it to run the lights and sound for the show. And what was amazing about it, there's also a stationary bicycle as part of the choreography to get some boosts for additional spotlights. But I designed a whole series of mechanisms around their body, and we iteratively choreographed. So here about how we would optimize the mechanical motion and get energy versus what she wanted to do as an avant-garde choreographer. So it was an amazing kind of whole education to me about avant-garde dance. One of these systems, the mechanical roller, which is basically back-driving DC motors, stepper motors. Linear slide, which is basically Faraday coils. Everyone knows how to shake flashlight works. Basically that, arms and legs. Beautiful clicking sound added to the choreography. And then some more passive techniques, passive wind, passive solar. We took out the passive wind. It wasn't giving us enough power in the end, but using all different kinds of new flexible, organic solar panels. This is how we prototyped. Super fun. Tape everything to the dancers, see what they do, and then me take the readings at the end of the day and figure out what we're going to do. So design this dance performance around the technology. Sample circuit, one of the prototypes, version 1, and then these are the kind of final costumes for the last performance. We're now working on some piezoelectric shoes for this kind of next thing. So let me show you just a minute of this beautiful performance. Some parts have sound, some parts don't, which didn't actually save power. People thought that was a strategy, but it just took more power to turn the thing off than it did to, just small. It's an artistic decision. You can turn up a little bit. So kind of there was an energy build throughout the performance. So Doug asked me, of course, what comes next. And what comes next for me is a new collaboration with the Elizabeth Streb Dance Company in New York. She's a Brooklyn-based choreographer who does amazing work interacting basically people with machines. It's so perfect for me, I can't even believe I finally got there. Just a quick, I'll just show you, this is one of their latest pieces that was performed outside in New York. So it's kind of half acrobatics, half dance, but Elizabeth talks about her dancers as action heroes, and she's coined this term called pop action, which is really about engaging the forces of the body. You can turn down a little bit. And actually trying to kind of create empathy in the audience around what the dancers are doing, and so you actually have a more visceral sense of what's going on. And so what we're doing is, for the 2012 Cultural Olympiad in London this summer, 2 months away, TikTok, building body sensor networks that basically record gyroscope sensing, acceleration, and different kinds of muscle microvoltage patterns and heart rate for all the dancers, and then we can actually stream all this data and have it basically manipulate sound and video as part of the performance, so that there's a kind of secondary level of understanding about what's going on internally with the bodies and what the dancers are feeling, and also about the relationships between the dancers. So I'm very excited for this to launch this summer. Performances all around London. And then, these are some of the suits that we've been working on. And then what comes next for this area in general? And I can't help but constantly be inspired by biology. And this is, of course, I think that everyone is seeing the sort of trends and everything around biotech, and it's just becoming, it is the kind of, the 21st century is a century of biology. And just as an example about how we create material composites and new forms of fabric, we no longer have to think about synthetics or the sort of the nature of farming and how the cotton industry is incredibly damaging, but this is a microbial cellulose compositing of fabric. This is a designer in London called Suzanne Lee. And she's making these, she's literally has a tank of liquid and she grows the fabric, and you can actually sculpt it into unbelievable patterns. And then secondly, using the body more as an inspirational form. This is the work of two artists, Lucy McRae and Bart Hessen, trying to think about the effects of things like synthetic biology and changing actually our bodies from the inside out. So what happens if we can grow strange appendages? What if we do become photosynthetic? So this is like literally seeded, an outfit that's seeded with grass. But these are incredibly visceral images because they're on the body. If that was sitting on a pile, you wouldn't actually even be thinking about it, really. And so here's one example of literally this. This is an actual chlorophyll slug, lives like in the ocean, and at certain times when there's food available, it'll eat, but if there's no food, it can just take in sunlight, and it goes back and forth. So this idea of these hybrid organisms, this is a concept piece, Homo chlorophyllus, by two of my students in Copenhagen, that it looks at exactly this. What if, because as we're going out into the world, what if, the dystopic future, we no longer can grow plants, we've destroyed the planet, we have to be able to grow things on ourselves, so we have to be half chlorophyll-based. This is not to say that this is all a utopic destiny. And there's a lot of ethical questions. The minute that we start manipulating our bodies, we have to be asking the hard questions. And I just want to leave you with this image from Stellark, who's an amazing Australian artist who's into body manipulation. But this is an actual ear that functions. There's basically a microphone in there, and you can actually broadcast what you're hearing from your arm into another space. So this is where we start to ask, do we want these different kinds of appendages? And like, this image is so, if this was an actual prosthetic, you'd feel, with like a microphone on it, whatever. The fact that it's actually of the form of an ear embedded in the arm has a totally different kind of visceral response from people. And then lastly, I just have to put this out there. Amazing new show I've been curating for the New York Hall Science. It's a show on art, science, and cultural sustainability. And if anybody's going to be in New York this fall, please come see it. 10 fantastic artists looking at the notions of sustainability, not as a sort of problem of environmentalism, but actually as thinking about cultural behavior patterns around it in Queens, the most diverse neighborhood in the country. So please come to this. More to come on that. Thanks.